Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today, on hand for review, we have the brand new GeForce GTX 1660 Ti. Actually, no, that doesn't sound right. We've done that one before. Sorry, I've got a few cards here. I might have muddled them up. Here we go. It is the brand new RTX 2060. Nope, that's wrong as well. That doesn't sound right. It must be the GTX 1660. No, there's something more. This one has to be it. The GeForce 2060 Super. It is a Super card, but it's not an RTX. It's not a 2060 series card. Well, it must be. Hang on. What have we got here? The GeForce GTX 1660 Super. That's the new graphics card. So yeah, that is the 1660 Super. So for those of you not keeping tabs, we now have the GTX 1660 for $220 US. Then we have the GTX 1660 Ti for $280 US. The RTX 2060 for $350, and then the RTX 2060 Super for $400. So that means between $200 and $400, we already have 4 options from Nvidia. But as of today, we now have 5. As the 1660 Super slots in at $230 US, and we've also heard there will be a 1650 Super, which is said to be coming next month, but of course we don't have any pricing information for that part just yet. Right then, so what's the deal with the GTX 1660 Super? Well, not a lot, to be honest. It doesn't really do too much to earn that Super title. In fact, it's the exact same GPU as the non-Super version, so just the base model GTX 1660. It has the same 22 SM units. That means it has the same 1,408 CUDA cores, and they're clocked at the same 1,530 megahertz for the base, with the same boost clock of 1,785 megahertz. So at this point, you're probably asking what is different? And it also has the same 88 texture units. So yeah, it really is the same GPU, the same texel fill rate, all that kind of stuff. It's the exact same GPU. So that means it's the exact same 12 nanometer, 284 millimeter square die comprised of 6.6 billion transistors. It also has a 6 gigabyte VRAM buffer, though it is here where the changes have been made. Nvidia's upgraded the 8 gigabits per second GDDR5 memory of the standard 1660 to 14 gigabits per second GDDR6 memory, and this has resulted in a massive 75% increase in memory bandwidth. In fact, this provides the 1660 Super with even more memory bandwidth than the Ti model. This also means the 1660 Super comes with the exact same GDDR6 memory that you'll find on the RTX 2060, the 2060 Super, the 2070, 2070 Super, 2080 and 2080 Ti. Oh, and even the Titan RTX. Now, increasing the MSRP by just $10 over the base model seems like a pretty good deal, as that's just a 4% increase in price for a 75% increase in memory bandwidth, which we're expecting to more often than not result in double-digit performance gains. Now, before we get into the benchmarks, here's a quick recap of the $200 to $300 price segment for this year. Way back in February, we got the first GTX 1660 series GPU, that one being the $280 US Ti model. Back then, I concluded by saying it was the first GPU release in quite some time that I'd come away feeling rather pleased with what we were given. The GTX 1660 Ti offered GTX 1070 Lite performance for a slight price premium over the GTX 1060 6GB. That said, I did note at the time that I recognized that many of you, and myself included, would have preferred it to be priced at $250 US, but I also noted that without any competition from AMD, it was still a pretty good result. A month later, we got the standard GTX 1660, and I really had nothing bad to say about it. In fact, I didn't really have anything remotely negative to say about it, apart from the fact that the naming scheme absolutely sucked, but I've been slowly getting over that throughout the course of the year. The GTX 1660 really was a good value offering from Nvidia, and it completely wiped out the GTX 1060 series, along with the Radeon RX 580 and 590, though the 1660 Ti really did take care of the 590. So that was the story up until March, and at the time the RX 590 had only dropped $10 from the $280 US launch price, which was, in our opinion, massively overpriced for that particular part. And this meant you were still better off with a 1660 series GPU. However, by April, the 590 was down to just $240 US, and then $210 US in May. And then by July, they could be regularly found for just $200 US. At $240 US, the 590 was roughly on par with the 1660 in terms of value, but at $210 US, it was a better deal, and at the current $200 asking price, it offers a lot more bang for your buck. So that means by slashing prices, AMD's managed to remain relevant in the low-end market segment with their old RX 500 series GPUs, and in fact managed to become the go-to option. It seems not wanting to get into a fierce back and forth pricing war, Nvidia has just pretended like those cheap 500 series GPUs don't exist, and they've stayed the course with their $220 US 1660 and $280 US 1660 Ti. That being the case, little has changed, and that also means the $200 RX 590 is no doubt going to be a thorn in the $230 1660 Super's side. Actually, right now the cheapest 1660 actually costs $230 US, so unless there's some sort of price correction in the next few days, I expect the 1660 Super to come in $10 over the MSRP, and that would make it $240 US. But of course, we'll just have to wait and see how that one plays out. Either way, it doesn't matter too much. For it to match the value of the RX 590, it will need to deliver 1660 Ti-like performance. And when I say like performance, I mean exactly GTX 1660 Ti levels of performance. Okay, so before we get into the results, a few quick notes on the test system. As always, our test system used includes a Core i9 9900K clocked at 5GHz with 16GB of DDR4 3400 memory, and the exact graphics cards used for testing can be found in the video description. For testing the GTX 1660 Super, we have the MSI Gaming X and Gigabyte Gaming OC models, both delivered the exact same performance, typically operating at 1965 MHz. The MSI Gaming X peaked at 63 degrees in our 1 hour F1 2019 stress test, and with a fan speed of 1700 RPM, it was very quiet. The Gigabyte Gaming OC ran 1 degree cooler for the most part, though it did peak at 65 degrees now and then. The fans also spun 100 RPM faster. Overall though, when gaming, both cards were very quiet. Now we have 17 games to look at. That's one more game than what Jared of Jared's Tech managed to do, so make sure you go over to his video and let him know that I managed to do one more game. So we worked that out just as we were finalising our reviews, and that's important. The fact that I beat Jared by one game is important. Anyway, I'll get on with it. All the games have been tested at 1080p and 1440p, though we're only going to look at the 1080p data in this video. So for all the 1440p graphs, please visit our Patreon page where you can find them for free. Okay, let's get into the results. First up, we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and here we see the new 1660 Super was just 4% faster than the base model. I guess that's in line with the 4% price hike, but yeah, not exactly an exciting result. Hopefully things do improve with the other games. Still, it was significantly faster than the RX 590, so I guess there's that. Here we do see a rather dramatic improvement when testing with Just Cause 4. This time the 1660 Super was 12% faster than the base model, making it just a single frame slower than the 1660 Ti. As a result, we're looking at GTX 1070 levels of performance in this title, and that's a GPU that cost $380 US about 3.5 years ago. So not amazing progress, but welcome to 2019. Moving on, we see when testing with Resident Evil 2 that there's almost no performance uplift for the 1660 Super over the standard 1660, just a 2% increase for the average frame rate. It did manage to match the RX 590, but at least in this instance, the performance increase is very unexciting. This time we see a 9% performance improvement for the 1660 Super over the base model, taking the average frame rate in Rainbow Six Siege from 118 FPS to 129 FPS, and that meant it was just 5% slower than the Ti model. Here we see another solid performance uplift, this time when testing with Battlefield 5. In fact, we see a 13% increase over the base model, and that's our best result yet. This also placed the 1660 Super just ahead of the RX 590. Unfortunately though, we only see a very mild 3% performance increase in Far Cry New Dawn, taking the average frame rate from 87 FPS up to 90 FPS, and that meant the 1660 Super was 11% slower than the Ti model, so yeah, not a great result here. Testing with the Division 2 sees the 1660 Super land right between the base model 1660 and the Ti version. That means with 74 FPS on average, the faster memory resulted in a 9% performance uplift. Ghost Recon Wildlands is obviously a very memory sensitive title, and here we see the 1660 Super enjoys a 13% performance boost thanks to the faster memory, and that placed it within a few frames of the more expensive Ti model. Here we see a very mild 3% performance improvement in Prey, so not a good result here, as anything less than a 4% increase makes the 1660 Super worse value than the 1660. As was the case with Battlefield 5, we see very solid gains for the 1660 Super in Star Wars Battlefront 2. Here it was 9% faster than the base model. That said, it was still 7% slower than the 1660 Ti, but that's still a great result for the new $230 US GPU. We've seen this in a few games, and here we have yet another example where the extra memory bandwidth leads to almost no performance uplift, just an extra frame for the 1660 Super over the non-Super version. Nvidia did claim up to 20% performance gains, and we have our first example of that here with Monster Hunter World. The 1660 Super was good for 67 FPS on average, and that did make it 20% faster than the standard 1660 and just 7% slower than the 1660 Ti. For Honor sees the 1660 Super delivering another significant performance improvement over the base model. This time, an 18% increase in frame rate is seen, and that meant the Super was just 5% slower than the 1660 Ti. So that's a pretty solid result right there. But here we have our best 1660 Super result yet. This time it was 25% faster than the base model. And just to be sure, I actually rechecked all three 1660 series graphics cards, and as it turns out, the results are accurate. This huge performance increase means the 1660 Super is much faster than not just the standard 1660 in The Witcher 3, but also the RX 590. Moving on, solid performance gains can be seen when testing with Sniper Elite 4. The 1660 Super was 14% faster than the base model and just 4% slower than the Ti model, so another excellent result here. The second last game tested was Kingdom Come Deliverance, and here the 1660 Super again does very well, beating the base model by a 9% margin to come just 3 FPS behind the 1660 Ti. Then, finishing up the gaming benchmarks, we have Middle of Earth Shadow of War, and here the 1660 Super was 19% faster than the base model and just 3% slower than the Ti version, so again, another excellent result. Now, here's a quick look at total system consumption. As you can see, the 1660 Super does suck down a little more power than even the Ti model. Clearly, that higher clocked GDDR6 memory is quite power hungry, and here we see it did increase total system draw by 9% over the standard 1660. Well, I have to admit, the 1660 Super looked much better in a number of those games than I was really expecting. There were a few that saw, the meaningless gains that we're probably really expecting to see, but overall the results did look very positive. That said, let's have a closer look at the average frame rates across all 17 games tested at 1080p. And as a reminder, for those of you who are more interested in the 1440p data, you can still get those graphs by visiting our Patreon page. The link to that particular post will be in the video description. Again, it's completely free to grab all of those graphs. Right, so here we can see the GTX 1660 Super delivered 88 FPS on average across the entire range of games tested, and that made it 10% faster than the base model and just 6% slower than the Ti model. Given it costs 4% more than the 1660 and 22% less than the 1660 Ti, that does seem like a pretty good result overall. We also saw at times where the 1660 Super was able to match the GTX 1070, but unfortunately overall it was still 6% slower. Still, it is 13% faster than the RX 590, so based off the MSRP pricing, that should put it within striking distance of its cost per frame result. The problem with that though being there isn't a single 1660 priced at MSRP, all cost $10 or more, placing them at $230 US as a minimum. That being the case, I have to assume the 1660 will come in at $240 US, unless Nvidia does drop the 1660 back down to $230 or eliminate it with the Super. For now though, I feel more comfortable working from $240 US, and at that price the Super is better value than the base model 1660 and much better value than the 1660 Ti. At the MSRP, it would cost just 2% more per frame than the RX 590, and I think that would make it the better choice given the greatly reduced power consumption. At $240 though, it's 6% more expensive per frame, so that certainly does make it a tougher sell, though you could certainly still argue in favour of it. When I first saw the official specifications for the GeForce GTX 1660 Super, I really wasn't sure what to make of it. The 75% increase in memory bandwidth is huge, but ultimately, if the GPU wasn't memory starved to begin with, that would just end up being a big number on paper that wouldn't translate into any meaningful gains in the real world. We did see a little bit of that. For example, the gains in Project Cars 2, Far Cry New Dawn, Prey, Resident Evil 2, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider were virtually non-existent. But we did see quite a few gains in the vicinity of 7 to 13%, which is how we arrived at a 10% improvement on average. There are even a few titles such as The Witcher 3, For Honor, and Monster Hunter World that saw gains in the 18 to 25% range. So, as expected, the performance uplift isn't universal, but we did see enough of a gain in enough titles for the 1660 Super to be a worthwhile product, particularly given it comes in just $10 US over the base model 1660. When compared to the AMD competition, we saw it was a good bit faster than the Radeon RX 590, beating it overall by a 13% margin. Of course, it's the price that will determine which way you should go, and if Nvidia really does offer the 1660 Super at $230 US, then I'd purchase it over a $200 RX 590, but of course retail pricing is yet to be seen at the time of making this video. Overall, I think it's fair to say I wasn't super interested in reviewing the 1660 Super. I was failing to see why it needed to exist, and while I'm still not over the moon about it, it does at least improve Nvidia's position in the sub $300 US price range. And the models that were provided for testing by Gigabyte and MSI, they worked exceptionally well, but again, we'll have to wait and see how much they cost. Hopefully, these factory overclocked examples are only about $10 over the MSRP. And that is going to do it for this one. If you did like the video, give it one of those, please. You can subscribe for more content. And if you'd like to get more involved with the channel, you can jump over to our Patreon page where you can join the Harbour Unboxed community, get access to our exclusive Discord chat, monthly live streams, a Q&A, and a few other cool things. Anyway, above all else, thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve, and I'll see you again next time.